Hi, this is Kit with Scrapbook Warehouse, and today I'm going to show you how to make this blue poinsettia holiday card. All the products that I use in today's card will be listed below. The first part of the card we're going to do is coloring the poinsettia because those pieces need to dry before we put them on. So I take a piece of white cardstock and using my Distress Oxide inks, I use my mini blending tool to put some of the ink onto the card. I don't need to cover it completely, just the parts that I want my poinsettia die to be placed onto so I can cut them out. Once I've removed all the poinsettia pieces, I'm going to flip the white cardstock over for the side that doesn't have any dye on it and use that to cut out the middle poinsettia blossom petals. That way I can have some variety in my poinsettia when I'm finished. Once I've got all my pieces pushed out of the die, I'm going to use the Alchemy Opal Magic Wax in turquoise satin. And you just want to sort of tap on or pounce on the magic wax. The reason you don't want to stroke on the wax is because it will actually give it a flat look and we want the 3D texture look instead. I'm going to do that on each one of the poinsettia petals, and as you can see, it gives it a really 3D textured look. Now I just finished my final two petals off and they're ready to be set aside to dry so that I can finish off the front of my card. For the front of the card, I'm going to use the Tim Holtz metallic papers in silver. So I've pre-cut my piece. I'm going to go ahead and use this embossing folder. I love embossing folders because of the textures they use, as well as it's so key in this particular technique to make the colors pop. Lining up your embossing folder is pretty important. So if you're not able to see it properly, I always turn it to the back where I can get a better idea of where my paper should begin. Now that I've run it through my Big Shot, I'm going to start to put on my oxide inks in peacock feathers. And you can dab this on, but I actually found it looked a lot better if I did some sort of brush and stroking circles with my blending tool. And that covered everything evenly. You don't want to press too hard or you'll get too much color coverage. Now I take my heat tool just to set and dry all of that ink. I'm not too worried if it curves the cardstock because it will flatten out perfectly once I put it on my card. Normally I wouldn't bother with drying the ink first, but I wanted to use my Versamark, so I didn't want to contaminate my ink pad with the blue peacock feathers. I put on my clear embossing powder, and then I grab my heat tool and the magic begins. So this technique is going to give you an enameled metal look, which is really unique and different, not something I see used all the time in holiday cards. It's highly reflective with a hint of color. If I wanted the color to be more intense and deep, I would just add more of the oxide ink on before I did the Versamark step. So now I'm going to go ahead and matte the silver. I want to cut it at an angle and have a little bit of the oxide ink color poking out from the bottom. I've got my example card, but you won't have one, so just go ahead and cut a scrap piece and get an idea of what kind of angle you want and use that as your guide. I tend to cut both the bottom piece and top piece together, and that way it's simple. I don't have to fuss or fight around with the angle of my cut. I'm using a light blue for the main back piece of the card, so I'm going to use my oxide ink again and just run it over the edge. It doesn't have to be perfect because it's just a little bit of color to show. I glue my silver piece onto there, just like that, and I'm going to trim off the edge with a pair of scissors. It's just quicker to do it this way. Now I'm going to mat it onto the main piece so I know where to stamp. Just a bit more of the tape runner. And center mat it on the top three sides. Now this acrylic block has lines on it to make it easier to stamp correctly. So I've used those. And then choose wherever you want your sentiment to go. Clean off your stamp and you're almost done. One of the almost final steps is we're going to put the mat onto the card backing. And I'm ready for my poinsettia flowers. Now, if you don't have flower shaping tools, you can use your pokey tool. Just be gentle to not tear off your poinsettia blossom petals. and it works pretty well for this. I use some of this glitter to add a little bit of dimension to the white poinsettia petal. It's a product called Nouveau Crystal Drops, and it adds a great bit of dimension to any of these small little pieces that just need a little extra help standing out. I'm just going to use my pokey tool to curve the edges of my petals again. And we're almost done. Using my matte adhesive, I'm going to stick my flower together. You can also use glue dots, which I use later on in this project, or any other small adhesive that you like, but the glue dots are probably the simplest way of doing it. So the easiest way to use these is to take your pokey tool and scrape the glue dot off and then stick it on the back of the poinsettia flower, and then use the pokey tool to press down in the middle of the flower, and that'll adhere it to the card. Now I'm using my crystal drops just to add some accents to the embossing folder in the background. And I'm pretty much done. This was a pretty quick card, took me about 15 minutes maybe. So it's a great card to do lots of if you have quite a few people on your list this year. Again, this was Kip from Scrapbook Warehouse. Thank you so much for watching. Please let us know by liking or commenting, and you can find more inspiration at our website.